The high-functioning village idiot reflects on Halloween. I think my first memory of Halloween was somewhere around kindergarten or first grade in Wappinger Falls, New York, when this would be about 1965. Just up above our property in the woods was a big water tower, big cylindrical water tower with a ladder going up the side of it. And we couldn't have lived there too many months when the local kids climbed that ladder on the water tower and hung like a Halloween dummy, some kind of effigy of a human being, way up at the top of that ladder. You could see it from a distance if you were driving down the road. A lot of the leaves would have been off the trees by October. And I was fascinated by that and remember staring up at it with a certain amount of apprehension, the kind of thing that a young kid feels when they're hearing an old fairy tale and things are getting pretty grim in it. This feeling of something's wrong, something's not right. I don't remember trick-or-treating when we lived there. I don't remember trick-or-treating when we moved to Indianapolis after that. And I don't remember trick-or-treating when we lived on Colvin Ave in Syracuse when I was in 4th grade. But I do remember trick-or-treating when we lived outside of Liverpool in Bayberry starting around 1969, because it was an enormous, sprawling suburb out, 10 miles from Syracuse, with just bunches of families with kids. We were baby boomers, between 59 and 62, the whole baby boom crested, post-World War II baby boom. Schools were packed, lots of manufacturing going on back then in the 70s, people making good money. Where we lived, there were a whole lot of Catholic families, and most of them had at least 4 kids. I dated a girl who was the oldest of 12 children when I was in high school. And there was a family up the street from her that had 13. So Halloween was busy. One of the local churches would have sort of a fall festival thing around that time of year with a little Ferris wheel and various throw darts at balloons kind of games and funnel cakes and sausage grilling and all that kind of stuff. This was long before the trunk-or-treat phenomena that we see now, which churches use to try to lure people into their congregations. Pretty ironic when you think about it, the whole origins of Halloween, pagan origins of Halloween, and yet it's being flipped over to lure people into this religious economy. Funny stuff. I remember in Liverpool, hundreds and hundreds and scores of kids were just out trick-or-treating. Everybody was giving out candy. Very seldom were there houses that didn't give out candy. And early on, I remember receiving things like apples and popcorn balls and Rice Krispie treats and so forth. Some people gave out homemade things. Some people gave out those little fun-sized candy bars, which occurred, I believe, in the late 60s. I seem to remember those little bite-sized Three Musketeers and Milky Ways happening in the 60s. I remember that was when we first, it was something that happened somewhere in the country. Somebody had slipped pins or needles or thumbtacks or pieces of razor blades or something like that into some sort of Halloween treats, turning them into pretty nasty tricks, and kids got injured when they bit into them. So I remember when there was a widespread national warning against people eating apples or homemade cookies and popcorn balls and so forth for fear that something might be embedded in them. That really put a scare in a lot of people, a lot of parents, a lot of kids. You could go to any store back then and find a whole mess of those costumes. I remember before they were non-flammable, you'd sometimes hear about a kid's costume or the cape from their costume igniting because they were standing too close to a jack-o'-lantern flame. I remember some of the rougher kids where we lived used to go out and carry scissors with them, and they would follow other kids and furtively cut a hole in the other kid's candy bag without them knowing about it, and then as the candy tumbled out onto the road while they were walking along, the other kids would gather up that free candy that was tumbling out onto the road. People didn't decorate their houses quite as crazily as they do now with these giant cloth pulsating witches and skeletons and ghosts and stuff, fake cobwebs, paper, printed paper things, orange and black things, pumpkins, green things, ghosts, witch faces. I remember kids would order those life-size Frankensteins out of the comic books, which were basically big, flat cardboard, printed cardboard things that were about 6 feet tall. I think you could also get a dragon. I seem to remember a mummy. Halloween was pretty fun. Around 8th or 9th grade, you realized that it was a kid thing, but you still liked candy, so you'd kind of push the envelope for another year or two until your neighbors started saying, "Aren't you a little bit too old to be walking around on Halloween getting candy?" What an industry Halloween is. Hipbone did a cassette release, an EP called Halloween with Hipbone. We improvised, I don't know, for about a half hour, along with one of those old vinyl Halloween sound effects records, playing at extreme volume in my Fitchburg warehouse rehearsal space / loft. It actually holds up pretty good as a piece of music all these years later, almost 30 years later. We haven't been doing Halloween for years. We usually stay indoors and watch a movie and just avoid the whole thing. Heck, these days, people just walk around with their kids. The kids aren't even in costume. They just walk up with a grocery store bag and hold it out and say trick or treat. People can't even throw together the semblance of a costume any longer. And I suppose most people want to have an expensive princess or something Disney-like costume on their kid, and a lot of kids can't afford that. Probably feel like it's not even worth risking ridicule to do one of those Charlie Brown costumes from back in the day. Something simple. Yeah. And here I am, 60 years old with 4 teeth missing, thinking about a day pretty much dedicated to the promotion of tooth decay.